Hi, David. Firstly, thanks for joining us today and taking part in this video series. Really appreciate you taking the time out to help us in this conversation looking at agentic AI and AI agents. So yeah, firstly, welcome to the conversation. How are you?
Thanks, Trevor. Really pleased to be able to participate. It's very exciting, so shoot ahead. I'm looking forward to the questions. I've been with SiteMinder for 3 years, and I've been involved in the AI transformation from the very first days. Even before the ChatGPT moment, I was looking into it. I was leading the Dynamic Revenue Plus product with machine learning and getting our data ready for the next steps. So all of this came very timely. And ever since, I'm pretty much spending 18 hours a day on this topic.
Perfect. So we've got the right guy on the conversation then, that's for sure. Just to kind of set the scene, and we've been doing this with the other interviews that we've had, it's that the purpose of this conversation is a lot has been written, as you rightly alluded to there, about AI, and ChatGPT came onto our radar a couple of years ago. 2025 seems to be about AI agents and agentic AI. But the vast majority of what seems to be written or discussed is often focused on how it might impact the traveler in the way that might go about booking hotels, for instance, or it's geared towards the hotel and how they might increase, efficiencies, productivity, guest experience. But not a lot have been discussed about how AI agents and this piece of technology could have an impact on hotel tech providers like you guys. So that's the angle that we wanted to take, looking at both opportunities, but also the threats that this new technology might bring to the table. So let's dive into the first question, a nice open question. I'm a positive kind of person, so we'll start with opportunities. What unique opportunities do you see AI agents and agentic AI will actually unlock for hotel tech providers?
Well, first we should probably align on what we understand with AI agents. So for me, very simply, it's AI that actually does stuff for you rather than you prompting it in order to respond to you or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it means that we're really looking at automating workflows. And the best you can do, or basically a requirement to automate workflows, is that it integrates and you connect to multiple capabilities, multiple systems, have a lot of data, clean data to work with, which can be structured or just can be conversations. Like there's lots of different things you can do. And all of this is required in order to really start building experiences and products for our customers, for the hoteliers. Right. So I think there's a number of opportunities in the space in terms of the usual ones: optimizing your distribution, optimizing the revenue optimization, as well as building out your partnerships and so on. And yeah, I think what we've been doing this for a while, right? So, so where do agents come in? Like, what's the difference here, right?
Well, I think that's the point. Yeah, it's like we're all talking about agents. How is that any different to what people have been doing with your solutions anyway?
Well, I think there's two angles probably to it. Like, first of all, we are now in a position to accelerate what we're building for the customers, and better integrating all of the tools and the processes and the different solutions, especially as a platform provider. And as you know, a lot of this it's been really hard over the last years. There's still a lot of legacy systems out there. There's a huge number of PMS systems out there and all of that. So anything that can help us kind of move faster and build better experiences is definitely making a difference, right? And this is where I guess agents, whether it is AI agents that create code or that support the customer teams or that help you to understand things like integrations and all of that, will certainly have a big role to play and ultimately translate to benefits to our customers. I think then when you look at the products that we can build with AI, that's where I think we're all still really early stage. And we really need to kind of understand the space that we want to play in and how we actually want to bring in all of these integrations that we have access to it. And I think you mentioned this year is 2025 is the year of AI agents. To some extent, I would say like the biggest development, which was actually towards the end of the last year, was the Model Context Protocol.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what I see across the industry and in our companies is really building out the knowledge hubs and
Yep.
integrations that allow agents to actually start walking,
Yeah,
right?
that makes sense.
And so there's a lot of work that still goes into it, and I think we are starting to see some of the first benefits out of this, but I think it's going to be the next 5 years is going to be the years of agents, and we haven't even fully understood yet what are these agents? Are we talking about ambient agents or chatbots or what is it? Right?
And that's the thing. It's a it's a terminology, but it could cover a multitude. People could define it in slightly different ways. As you say, it is something that does something. It is a task, it actions a workflow, but how that will manifest itself. And I guess that can apply internally as well. You could look at it from how can we integrate this AI agent technology into our solutions and for the SiteMinder clients. But it's also how can you be utilizing it internally, and how can agents be helping your company with efficiencies and productivity and operational enhancements. So I know there are a lot of companies, they don't like to talk about how they're using it internally, and I understand that that's competitor information. But there are areas where obviously that can aid an organization itself, which then in itself can enhance and free up time and space to create new opportunities for your own customers, I would guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's also another dimension to it, which is that the marketplace is changing. Like as we are starting to see the way that people interact with the web in order to actually do bookings for hotels is starting to change. Like we can see the first like the first time ever that Google search is dropping. We have these new AI players, and how you search for like how AI search optimization works is very, very different to the search optimization that you can do in order to promote your hotel.
Yep.
And all of this is happening currently in real time. And I think there are a lot of opportunities that kind of go beyond that, where our experience on the internet will be more and more intermediated with AI. So that means that we have to be, I guess, looking at ways that we can make the inventory of our customers available to these agents as well, right? So there's this agent to agent interface on top of it, which is currently, built out on top of all of the other things.
That's the next development. It would be interesting to watch how that develops. Okay, let's flip the coin over, and having looked a little bit at what potential opportunities, and again, it's all a bit of guesswork. There's some stuff going on, but we're all kind of future gazing and wondering what it could be. But let's look a little bit at if not the opportunities, but the threat side, and specifically, again, trying to keep this focused around the hotel technology providers, the current landscape. I mean, to me, and I admit I'm very low level understanding, just getting my head around it. But AI agents to me would seem to pose a threat to certain aspects or maybe all elements of the hotel technology stack, and therefore the providers in one shape or form. I'm interested to get your view of how you see the potential threats evolving or what they may be.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, there are threats around the changes that will happen in terms of how the inventory is being distributed, right? We've been for many, many years in a place where we have established OTA, so online travel agencies that we are connecting and all of that. That might get a little bit more complicated now with agents doing the search, and there's a risk that this could kind of lead to a race to the bottom, right? If it's all about pure API access, if you've got a personal agent that could continuously shop for what you want to know without really caring where it comes from, that could be a very new scenario. Having said that, it doesn't have to be that way. I think there's a lot of opportunities that hotels can continue to own customers through loyalty programs. So that means that there are opportunities as well for the tech providers supporting these hotels to kind of lean in on that and make that a success. If you look more like what does it actually mean for all of the hospitality tech, I think there's a shift towards the importance of data. Like we always talked about how important data is, and generally we were limiting that to structured data. But to some extent, it even becomes more important because if you want to build out these machine learning algorithms and AI that kind of optimize pricing, for example, in real time, you need to have hundreds of millions of bookings ideally in order to really power these neural networks. And a lot of training data. And so smaller players without that data might not have what it takes to kind of compete and provide really valuable, accurate, reliable tools.
Understood.
And yeah, right. So there's a potentially discussions around, winner takes all dynamics and so on. I don't think it's as clear cut, but certainly there's going to be some changes. I think there's also a threat to the general business model. Like we've been very comfortable with subscriptions in the past, like SaaS, right? Generally, it's a subscription. Whereas I think what we're starting to see is that is shifting where we are looking at, because the costs of using AI and so on is token based, right? And you can start to see that agents are being priced by the job they're doing, or by the success they're having.
You can actually now start to pinpoint it.
Number of actions, or even being successful at that action. So I think there's a whole new business models evolving out of that. So obviously, for tech providers, or whether incumbents or new players on the market, that is something to wrap our head around. Right, because that really changes the fundamentals of how we run the business.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because I guess if you have an agent that could go and make a booking, then the success is the booking. It's not just going out and finding the information and you having to do it. So are you then prepared to pay for that success? And so if as a traveler if I take that example, who am I actually paying? Am I paying the agent, the provider of the agent? Am I paying if it went to an OTA? Because a lot of these seem to be going, interestingly enough, something I've been reading over the last couple of days, when these agents go out to make a booking, they tend to lean straight towards the OTAs because that's where it finds back to your point, that vast majority of data to answer the question it's being asked to prompt. So is the OTA now getting that commission and the agents getting the commission, but then there's no other tech provider in that equation, in that journey? So that's a very interesting challenge to the business model, I guess.
I mean, I can see I'm on most of the leading models at the moment. So if I'm attempting a booking, and I'm not in the States, so it's a bit different in the States. They are one step ahead, where you can actually perform the booking and do the payment. But if I'm on Perplexity, I can see that if I'm asking for a particular kind of, say, business trip, book me hotels, here's my data, or whatever, that I get different answers sourced from different sources in Perplexity than I would get if I do the same request by a ChatGPT or by a Claude, and all of that. Even between the models, there are differences.
Right.
So I think it's not as uniform, but I would certainly agree that those players and some of the big players, like with ChatGPT, for example, it's Booking.com, that are on the forefront and best serving the agents, being a agent first. Like we're talking about a switch between UX, user experience, to agent experience, right? Providing an amazing agent experience, as well as making sure that it's a trusted, reliable, fast, data-rich experience for the agent. They'll certainly have a leg up.
Interesting. I'm wondering then, talking about that scenario, how do you see things developing with the large hotel groups, the big brands? I mean, if they, in a sense, they have that same amount of data that you could argue, maybe not the size of Booking, but they're pretty close in terms of the wealth of what they have available, content, data. Do you see, what's your view on whether we might start to see a widening gap between the hotel groups and the bigger brands that would leverage their own consolidated structured data and look to build, I mean, either they will get a third-party company to provide the agents or build their own proprietary AI agents. And so their reliance on third-party hotel tech providers, almost going back to where they were when they were developing their own technology in the past. How do you see that evolving? Do you see them going down that potential route?
I think a lot of the big hotel groups, like the Hiltons of this world, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have their own tech stack. Like they're basically most of their tech stack is already owned by them. So
Mm-hmm.
they are being able to draw on, they have a data advantage, you might argue, right? They can draw on millions of loyalty members, like decades of rich training data sets, if you want
Yeah.
to. Having said that, I would say that the platform provider, for example, as SiteMinder, we have a similar large number of independent hotels that we
Mm-hmm.
can draw on. And that data set is potentially even more interesting because it's a little bit more diverse.
Yeah.
It's more kind of spread and global.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also other players in the market. So if you look at the OTAs, for example, you can take whether it's Booking.com or other providers in the space, they have a lot of data as well they can look into. So I think to me, it's not a clear-cut advantage to large hotel groups, right? I think they will build. I don't necessarily think they will win. And I really see the mode in order to win as the integration depth, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the distribution reach, of course.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you integrate? And so the larger providers, they will have their own PMSs and so on. So the integration is pretty straightforward. But
Yeah.
platforms that can integrate in hundreds of different types of PMS will have at least equally an advantage in that space, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. I was wondering whether or not we might start to see some, because there are a number of hotel tech providers out there that focus on the independent or smaller groups, but are obviously also will provide enterprise solutions into the larger brands. And I wondered if there may be certain applications of technology where the groups might say, do you know what, we could develop our own proprietary agent to do that job. And so we don't need, and you might start to see a slicing off of certain third-party providers that maybe traditionally have had one element of, say, the guest journey or one part of the process or one solution within the overall guest journey that they could say, well, we could carve that out, get rid of that and develop that internally ourselves. I wondered if it might go down that route, and that might create that divide where you start to see some providers only focusing on the independent and smaller groups, because now the larger groups are just saying, well, we can build that piece ourselves. We don't need to externally source that from a third party now.
Possibly. I mean, first of all, I think like the foundation of AI, agentic AI, and so on, we're looking at a pretty level playing field here because it comes from the big kind of cloud providers, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's Bedrock by AWS or GCP, and also the model providers themselves are accessible to anyone. And so I think when it comes to the tools in order to build something, it's pretty level. As I said, the big differentiator is the data you can draw on. I think as big chains, like, do you have an advantage then kind of with your distribution and being more real time? I don't necessarily think so. I think there's something to be said about the collective intelligence of a platform that brings in a lot more different players because there's just more data that is specific to different use case scenarios and so on. It's more spread if you want to, right?
No, that makes sense. And I guess that nicely leads me on to, if we shift away from the hotel side of things and look specifically at the hotel tech providers, we've already seen over the last 12 months a number of acquisitions. I'd like to get your views on whether we are moving down a path which takes us back to the one-stop shop. We'll see more acquisitions, consolidations, bigger players providing that all-inclusive solution, or whether you still see the space for the best in breed that might have a standalone option. Tackle that bit first, and then we'll talk about new players coming into the market. Where do you see us taking a one or other route, or will it all stay the same? Are we going to be consolidating? Where do you think we're going to be in a couple of years' time with the landscape as it exists today?
I think both simultaneously. I think, first of all, in terms of yeah, I really believe so. I think we will see a consolidation wave, right? I think certain point solutions, they will simply collapse because they're just not integrated enough. They don't have enough, unique data to be viable moving forward. I can also see that a lot of these might be hired, like acqui-hires for data, if you want to, right? We saw a lot of acqui-hires for talent recently.
Yeah.
So legacy vendors bought for historical data sets or not necessarily the products. I think that could be a thing. Like all the capabilities, because the UI doesn't matter that much. It's really about capabilities and the APIs and all of that.
Yeah.
I can also see that there will be private equity roll-ups in the space. So I think there's a lot of potential for consolidation, accelerated by AI changes in the market through AI. I think there's also there's going to be a lot of new entrants, right? If anything, that's going to be explored, right? Because it's so easy now, in theory at least, to start, coding and building specialist tools and best of brand as AI natives, and you can get started with much smaller teams as in the past. And there's a lot of kind of new things that I can see people trialing, like voice concierges and all of these. To what extent they're just going to be rolled up back into a platform, I think is to be seen. I mean, personally, I believe that the platform ecosystem in the scenario will win because of the depth of integrations that is ultimately required in order to drive meaningful actions, right? So you just need to be across all of these different things. Otherwise, you're kind of stuck. You can't do a lot, right? And I think this is where we're at.
When you talk about new players, I mean, there's we look at the PMS, but then we look at pricing, the RMS. Lots of people have come into that space over the last 3, 4, 5 years as well. So you could look at entrepreneurs, innovators thinking, okay, let's develop a solution that could fit into the hotel market. I'm also wondering about the larger players that already exist that are providing an AI agent solution into other industry sectors, and may look at the hotel sector. So not that new startup that might be looking at either breaking through or potentially making enough noise that then they get acquired and it's actually an acquisition strategy rather than establishing itself solid in the marketplace. But there could be other providers in other sectors who think, well, if we could refine our product and look at the hotel sector as a vertical market and come into that, they've got a bit more behind them, larger budgets, larger marketing teams, brand recognition. What's your view on people who are trying to bring a more generic product into a hotel sector product?
Yeah, I think people have tried over the last years, and hotels are complex. Like making a booking is a lot more complex than just purchasing a shirt online.
Yeah.
And so I believe that the knowledge and like the complexity around connecting with these different systems and making all of these options available that travelers actually need and want, including things like loyalty and so on, is actually very tricky, right? And there's also a lot of the kind of the last mile is going to be the integration with the PMS ultimately, right? Because that's where it's happening. So I think, talking to a few people, I think a lot of people try to connect to the AI agent in an easy way, but connecting downstream to all of these different PMS is going to be a lot harder. And so this is where the incumbents and the traditional channel managers like SiteMinder, will have a leg up, because that takes just years of work. Even if some of this might be accelerated with new AI tools, it's if not decades of work, right? You have to build the partnerships and the relationships. It's not just a software thing.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So, if I'm sitting there as a hotelier, and I'm hearing all about these AI agents, and it sounds fun and great, this new shiny thing, and I want to start maybe exploring it. And that can mean many things to many people. Just that I'm going to explore AI agents. But what I'm interested to get your angle on is where there maybe needs to be some caution. So some words of caution, in terms of the challenges, and you already highlighted some of those about just from an integration point of view. But if you take data just as the core that drives all of this, what are maybe some things that hoteliers aren't so cognizant of around data that they maybe need to be mindful of when thinking of exploring this avenue?
Yeah, I think there's probably multiple things. Data governance is the key one here, right? Because ultimately you will be dealing with customer data. So compliance around your guest PII is absolutely critical. There's a lot of different regional and global regulation that you need to comply with. That is actually quite hard. And on top of that, you might have to make sure that the data is safe, even if in transit, like encryption, all of these things. You're liable for breaches. So to some extent, as somebody who is enjoying to vibe code myself, right, this is not something that I would touch. And even with startups, and we are looking at a number of startups across our innovation efforts, like data security, compliance, all of that is top of mind, and it's just not hard to work at the enterprise level as a startup, right? There's so many things that you need to do. So I would definitely caution here in terms of make sure that whatever you're experimenting with, if it's coding yourself or if you are looking at smaller players, make sure they're compliant, right? Because otherwise this can seriously backfire. I think then we're also still really early days with AI in general, and especially with agents. And agents generally require a number of different steps in taking the output from one step or prompt or orchestration of agents into the next. And there can be an accumulation of small errors that might lead out to quite unexpected outcomes. And again, these are really tricky, and like making sure that how they're performing is something that, again, I would caution. I would make sure that there's plenty of testing and trialing in-house, internal processes before you really expose something like that to your customers. And so you need, again, strong data governance around it, some human checkpoints like the human in the loop. All of this is labor intensive, but very, very important. And then finally, I think what you call it grounding or truth grounding, whatever your system is based on, like, do you really have the data, or does the partner that you're working with have the data in order to drive the right outcomes, like really relevant and accurate and all of that? Because AI is really good at making stuff up if we wanted to, and I don't necessarily see that as a bug. Like in many cases, hallucinations is fantastic, like for brainstorming, right? But then making up prices might not be as good.
Depends what you want to use it for.
Exactly. So there's that. I think there's another dimension that we're also discussing internally, which is vendor lock-in with your data. So
Mhm.
suddenly, when we discuss data in the age of AI, it is not just your structured data, but there's also like your conversation with customers and all of these
Mhm.
different things that you might want to bring to the table in order to create more holistic solutions and so on. And you really want to make sure that you own your data. You
Yeah.
work with platforms or providers that really allow you to own your data. You can always download it, or you can sync with whatever your source of truth is.
Mhm.
So this becomes more important than ever because you will realize if you're working in a bigger company or in an ecosystem that you have really relevant knowledge, information, data across many different systems. And with agents, they need to be able to talk to all of these, and you need to be able to switch out eventually, right?
Yeah.
And maybe simplify it down the line.
Yeah.
So make sure that you own your data and you're not kind of locked into one solution, in particularly for multi-year contracts or that stuff with a fast changing environment. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think
It makes a lot.
that's basically it.
That
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense. We've seen recently. We know that there are unscrupulous players out there that will look to try and hack into companies to access data. To what degree does this evolution of AI agents and having these multiple agents looking at your data, to what degree could that pose a security risk, or is the way that it works and structured, it's not going to suddenly open up a fault line that someone could manipulate to gain access to a large treasure trove of information?
Yeah, no, it's a real risk that you're calling out here, and I think there's probably two main aspects. There's like nefarious players maybe trying to hack into your data, prompt injections. There's all kinds of things. So you really, again, you need to work with really secure, trusted systems
Mm-hmm.
on your customer data. To prevent that, and that will just accelerate. And I think there's going to be a budget for security uplift required on all
Yeah,
fronts because
yeah,
it's a much more dangerous environment out there, right?
yeah,
And also the agents will be looking for those kind of trusted APIs. I think we'll see where like less and less people will start booking directly from just some random site because anyone can spin these up now, right? So
yeah, yeah, yeah.
it goes back to trust and these systems. There's another one, interestingly, as well, where now that suddenly you can bring all of this information to the AI, like how well do you know what is in your knowledge base?
Mm,
Right? Whether these are systems and customer data or internal processes and Confluence or whatever it is. Like I think what we are realizing is you need to be ready to actually really clean this up to make sure there's nothing in there that shouldn't be in there or
yeah,
that could have been there for years and you would have never come across it. But now with a agentic enterprise search or something, suddenly
it
this
pops
might
up.
be
It
the
comes
most
out
relevant,
somewhere.
coming up
Yeah,
as the most relevant information and informing some sort of conversation or so on. So like that
yeah,
is really important. So make sure that you opt in with systems where you are in control of the integrations at a fairly fine-grained level, right? So it's
yeah.
not all or nothing, but you'll be able to kind of test this incrementally.
That makes a lot of sense. The reason that we thought about having this conversation now is not just because it's topical, but also because we know this is the period where hoteliers are starting to have early thoughts about their budget for 2026. And you will know better than I do, working with hoteliers all the time. There are multiple stakeholders, and someone sitting there putting together a budget has probably got numerous people in their ear telling them about this new shiny thing they should be focusing on, or we should be investing in agents, we should be doing X, Y, and Z. And so whilst it can be an exciting space to be in, it can also be a little overwhelming. It can be a little bit confusing, which is hopefully what we're trying to do with these conversations, to clear up some of the mud a little bit. But it also can bring about hesitation. Which path do I take? Which avenue do I go? Should I be allocating budget in which areas? So I just would welcome your viewpoint in a non-salesy way, and thank you, because that hasn't been your approach through all of this conversation. So it's kind of, but if you were advising a number of people that are sitting there saying, well, how should I be thinking about structuring my budget for 2026? What considerations should I be having as relates to technology, and where does this whole AI agent bit sit? What advice would you be giving them?
Yeah, I mean, and generally, I would budget like I've done over the last year, and then look at the delta, the differences that you really want to invest. Or I think what you should be investing in is in data readiness. As we discussed before, it's about the quality of the documentation of your processes, data of anything that matters, and that could be with vendors, or that could be in an external platform, database, so on. But I mean, certainly that is one area where I can see across the board in tech companies, but also probably hoteliers, that we should invest, right? Because the data is, the AI is only as good as your data, and a lot of the data is pretty bad, and the AI will not necessarily tell you it's bad, right? Because as opposed to previous system, yeah, or even worse, right? Previous system would break if your data schema is not up to scratch, and you ask it to do something that it couldn't, right? And you basically get an error message. Whereas with AI, it will basically try to make it work in unexpected ways,
come
right?
With something. Yeah.
Exactly, right.
Come back with a lasagna recipe.
Yeah, or maybe in a way. I mean, it's trying to be helpful, right? So it's and so basically you lose that. You easily lose what the source data, your original data, is actually all about. So I would definitely spend some time, resources on that. I think I would look at funding the capabilities and the areas that you want to, get better at, and that includes ring fencing some funding for skills like staff development, staff training. Make sure that they are ready for how their role and will transition. Right, I think all of our roles will transition to some extent, because some tasks will become redundant or can be automated, but that doesn't mean that we are redundant or the role per se is redundant. It's more like, right, how do we evolve to kind of go faster and better, and hopefully it's going to be improving the employee experience as well. But that means basically, first of all, there should be some safe sandbox where people can start testing ideas or just training, right? Making sure that there's that, and that also includes getting them on a professional license with some of these AI tools rather than the free ones, which is training the models. And the second is also like, investing in the skills and having workshops, and that could be an interesting one, because a lot of the best ideas come from the subject matter experts. And so you need to find ways that you can empower them to actually build their own agents in some extent, right? Rather than just acquiring everything, or reaching out and collaborating with bigger tech players, because that's another opportunity, right? So we're always looking for customers and their needs in order to look at building something together in a way, right? So that is another area I would say. So innovation sandbox, data readiness, and really funding, upskilling the capabilities, right? Because the people outlast tech in the end.
Yeah, typically. Let's hope that continues to be the case. Look, I really appreciate there's some excellent points there. I really appreciate your insights and your thoughts and your angle. And I think as being part of this series, that combination, we're getting some really mixed views and thoughts. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.